In 1873, Herbert Spencer wrote the foundational work on sociology in the English-speaking world called Studies in Sociology. In it, he writes about how societies are not the products of so-called great men, like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, or Napoleon, but rather that a nation is a dynamic system of interrelationships between various institutions. For instance, government is one institution, economics is another, academia is yet another, religion is another, and so forth. These institutions create the habits by which we live. For instance, with respect to religion, we have cultural habits called traditions, which tell us that every Christmas falls on December 25th. Regarding government, the habits include things like every 4th of July we have Independence Day. Likewise, our Constitution is a paper algorithm that tells us that every 4 years we vote on a president, every 6 years we elect a senator, every 2 years we cast a ballot for a congressman, and so forth. The German philosopher Hegel wrote that a constitution is the embodiment of the ethos of a people, and that the chief purpose of government was to perpetuate that ethos into posterity. The chief method of doing this is creating the cultural habits that we call traditions. Education, a third institution, exists to pass on these traditions to the next generation. Donella Meadows, in the book Thinking in Systems, calls academia the DNA of the society, because like DNA, academia is the information transmission system from one generation to the next. Change the syllabus, and you will change the genetic code of the society. At any rate, Herbert Spencer articulates how some of these cultural habits get passed down and you aren't even aware of it. For instance, why do you shake hands when you first meet someone? The answer to this is because in the Middle Ages, everyone carried a sword for protection. There was no police force, so when you met someone on the road and you had to establish that you were friendly, you'd shake hands to demonstrate that you weren't carrying a weapon. Likewise, why is it the default mechanism for men to favor shorter hair? This derives from Alexander the Great. He told his men to cut their hair so that the Persian adversaries on the battlefield couldn't grab them by their hair and slit their throats. As a result, short hair came to be associated with the military, hence with masculinity. We sleepwalk 500,000 ways, actuated by these cultural habits that make up a large part of our public personality. Ethics is, in a very real sense, habit formation. Cicero said that no one was born ethical. This is a methodology that has to be trained in, and once it is, these moral behaviors become what he called a second nature, a phrase that we still use today. Aristotle likewise laid emphasis on this fact when he said that habit formation was at the core of ethics. Excellence, he said, is not an act, but a habit. The problem arises when ethics is no longer taught, and instead, habit formation is outsourced to more cynical actors, like propagandists. The father of propaganda, Edward Bernays, said in 1926, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." Bernays worked for the first Ministry of Propaganda in America during World War I. It was called the Committee on Public Information. Propaganda had always been a weapon of war. Bernays was instrumental insofar as he said that after the war ended, why not use the same techniques on the public? He rebranded his field and coined the term public relations. The talent for enacting habit formation honed during the war would now be leveraged for corporations. One of the new habits Bernays is credited with is getting more women to smoke. He was approached by the tobacco industry, who felt as if they were losing profits if only half the society was using their product. They paid Bernays to try and create a new social habit for the country's females. See here.
Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came. And Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment. And so he was ready with a phrase, which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch, you see? And so all of this is there together. There's emotion, there's memory, there's a rational phrase. Even though it's using a lot of emotional elements, it's a phrase that works in a rational sense. All of this is together. And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York papers, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic act.
What Bernays had created was the idea that if a woman smoked, it made her more powerful and independent, an idea that still persists today.
Propaganda is weaponized habit formation, and it's invariably based on bad habits. Vices, it turns out, is lucrative, and a fool and his money are soon parted, so vices peddled to people as a way to separate them from their cash. One need look no further than TV advertising to note that a key trait of commercials is the encouragement of behaviors previously associated with vices, like lust. Consider car commercials with scantily clad women in the foreground completely drowning out the alleged product in the background. Lust is used as a psychological device to manipulate the potential customer with Pavlovian associative conditioning. Likewise, greed. A Doritos commercial, for instance, discourages sharing and has a child snatch away his chips from a friend with the tagline, "Get your own." The industry is driven by appeals to greed, gluttony, envy, and so forth. In a digression, it might be added that according to Tom Crompton in Meeting Environmental Challenges, this kind of advertising is harmful to children. He writes, "Research has shown that young children are cognitively and psychologically susceptible to advertising. They typically do not understand the notion of intent to sell and frequently accept advertising at face value. Studies also have found that exposure to commercial television increases children's scores on assessments of materialistic values." This, of course, strikes quite a contrast to a productive society which is guided by the 7 cardinal virtues: temperance, forbearance, prudence, chastity, diligence, patience, and humility. Ethics is training to impart good habits, to hack the mind, and to institute useful and healthy behaviors. If we neglect this, and if we just tell people to improvise, this will lead others to upload new habits, as Cass Sunstein describes in his book, How Change Happens. In it, he describes the tactics of so-called choice architects and how they create new normals, as he calls them, norm entrepreneurs. Remember, all institutions attempt to impart habits to the population. Some are nonsensical and of old standing, like the institution of religion imparting the custom of saying bless you when someone sneezes, upon the belief that the incantation keeps demons from possessing them. Other institutions, like the economic system, want to impart bad habits because they make money off of people. For, as Edward Bernays said, propaganda consists of the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of the country. Ethics is the antidote to this kind of thinking. Conversations That Matter, hosted by Alex Newman, interviews key people with important information to share that they, big government, don't want you to hear. Information that might save your life and family, literally, as well as your liberty. Check it out on thenewamerican.com.